Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 107th episode of Stories of Service, Ordinary People Who Do Extraordinary Work. And I am the host of Stories of Service, Teresa Carpenter. And today I'm super excited. I have another amazing guest with me today, Mike Cantwell. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Great weather here in Arlington, Virginia.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad to have you. And today we are going to talk about politics. And that is something that has been a little difficult, as I was saying before the call, for me to talk about as somebody who serves on active duty. But I also believe, as I said earlier in the post, that for us military members, we don't sit idly by when we see injustice. I think we're a powerful coalition when we come together and when we have discussions about hard issues, and then we work together to take on institutional reform. So, Mike is on a mission to fix what he calls a dysfunctional political system. He is currently the Virginia Task Force lead for Veterans for All Voters and was the vice president for FairVote Virginia and the DC chapter leader for Unite America. He is also the president of the Yorktown Civic Association and is active with his local VFW post and Alumni Association. In 2021, he ran as an independent for the Arlington County Board, and earlier this year, he launched Independence for America, and we're going to talk about that later. He recently retired from the National Geospatial-Intelligence Agency. He's had a number of jobs before then, including with Booz Allen Hamilton, at CACI, NGA, and National DIA, and with the Navy. And speaking of the Navy, just like myself, he served over 28 years in the Navy and Navy Reserves, where he was recalled to active duty after the terrorist attacks on the Pentagon in 2001. He's been a watch officer in the Navy Operations Center. And then in 2023, he was released from active duty and he retired as a commander. He's also a Naval Academy graduate and earned his master's degree in national security and strategic studies. He's served as a navigator on board the USS Nashville. He's also been a deck division officer on board the USS Luce. Welcome again, Mike.
All right, Teresa, thank you very much for inviting me on your show.
Awesome. All right. So I always ask people who have served, why did you serve? What led you to go down that path from your childhood to when you decided to raise that right hand?
Great question. My father was an officer in the Air Force, and we actually lived over in Germany twice when I was growing up. And when I was in high school, we settled about 8 miles from the Naval Academy in Maryland. And I just fell in love with the Naval Academy. I've always been a water person, so I probably had the best job I ever had was being a sailing instructor at Annapolis Sailing School. And I was just committed to doing whatever I could do to get into the Naval Academy. My grades weren't great. I wasn't a superstar athlete. So I went to a military school for a year, and then I started my journey at the Naval Academy in 1983. So my father being in the military, me being in the the Annapolis and DC area,
Mhm.
um, being really attracted to service and national security was just what I really wanted to do. And I always wanted to be a naval officer on a ship. I think ships are, a great thing about the Navy is that you have a lot of different options, different things you can do. But to me, the Navy is ships at sea. So
Yeah.
really attracted to that. And then I stayed in I got off of active duty in 1992, but I stayed in the Navy Reserves until 2015.
Wonderful. Yeah, the active duty Navy. I mean, I'm sorry, the surface warfare community is definitely like the heart and soul of the Navy. I too was a prior surface warfare officer, and so I always have a soft spot for the SWO community. Um, Tell me a little bit more about what that transition was like for you after the military. Did you find that to be easy to transition into some of the jobs that you did later on, or was that a little rough, or how did that go for you?
That's a great question because it was harder than I thought it would be to transition. So I left active duty. I went to graduate school at George Washington University and kind of went around to a few different jobs after you know in the mid '90s. But as many service members experience, it's really difficult. I think things are better now. There's a lot of resources out there. In fact, I want to give a plug to this organization called the Commit Foundation, which is for usually high flag officers or senior enlisted, but it's really high end career coaching, and then they have social events. In fact, that we've got some free tickets to the Commander game on Sunday. So, giving people a sense of camaraderie after they transition, and knowing that you have that network out there that you can plug into to help you find your next job or your next career, or if you want to start your own business.
Oh yeah. And I think that you're right. There are a lot of resources out there, but I mean, we still only have our 1 week TAP class, and in 5 days, you definitely aren't going to learn all the things that you need to know. It takes a lot of deep dive research, and a lot of people like myself, we start years before prepping for that next chapter because like you, when it's been something that has been a part of our lives, all of our adult lives, it's quite the transition to say, okay, I'm no longer serving, and we want to be ready for what comes next.
And I
And
do want to give a little plug to the reserves, though. So, for people who are saying, "Look, active duty isn't for me anymore," I highly encourage people to affiliate with the reserves. It's a lot of hard work, weekends, and 2 weeks away from your family usually, and maybe even getting mobilized. But it was definitely the right thing for me. And you mentioned you're going to Portugal. I was able to travel to Portugal 3 times while I was in the Navy Reserves to do a NATO exercise. So, a lot of good opportunities, and you also get to kind of come together with people in uniform, and then you all go back to your civilian job. So it's a great networking opportunity if you join the reserves.
and as an active duty member, I always appreciate my reservists because I feel like they come in with skill sets from the outside world that we're not always as exposed to, especially in the, for the public affairs, the communication community. Sometimes our reservists are politicians, they're reporters, they work in, film and TV. So we really appreciate being able to work with them and have that skill set already built in when they come to work in our offices, and they bring something to the fight that the other active duty I think can learn from, and vice versa. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity to continue to give back, and then also, like you say, have that outside world into the military. So um, as you started to transition, tell me a little bit about when your interest in politics started to take hold. Was that something that you were already involved with as an active duty member, or was it something that you deepened into once you transitioned?
No, it really wasn't until many years later. So, I've been living in the same house here in Arlington since 1998. So, doing the normal things you would do if you're establishing roots somewhere. And I have 3 children. I coached a lot of sports, and active in the PTA, and things like that. And then I got involved in my local civic association. So, just a geographical area within Arlington where we have about 2,000 households, and so I discovered I really enjoyed it. So I was on the board, and then I became the president, and I actually liked helping solve problems for my neighbors. So, hey,
Mhm.
Mike, we got to, really need a crosswalk here, or hey, Mike, the cars are going through here too fast, or the school's going to do this big expansion. How's that going to affect
Mhm.
parking? All these just really local issues. So I liked it. I thought I was pretty good at it. And then and then the 2016 presidential campaign. I'm like, what is going on? There's so much vitriol and people yelling and screaming at each other, and then, to be frank, with the 2017 inauguration with Donald Trump, it was probably the darkest speech I've ever heard. That America is in decline and we're terrible, and then him starting to talk about crowd sizes, and
Yeah.
as a public affairs professional with Sean Spicer, who also is a Navy Reserve officer,
Yep.
getting in arguments with the press about which inauguration had more bigger
More
crowd,
people. Yes.
more people. And then another really, and I was in the intelligence community at the time, and Trump immediately went to CIA within the first day, and that was also very ominous that he's going to be, kind of having an iron thumb on the intelligence community and not having independent analysis and things like that. Um, so I just Googled the word centrist because that's who I am, and I stumbled upon this organization called Unite America, and they were having a meetup in downtown DC, and where they were just talking about the theory of change. So the theory of change being, if we can just have a few independents in the House and in the Senate, it really could get us on a better trajectory, because we have so much extreme polarization where we
Hmm.
really need this kind of common ground where we can have some decision space. And their theory of change is, if we just had a few independents in Congress, that we could really turn down the temperature and get things done. So I raised my hand. I said, "Hey, I'll be the DC chapter lead." We had a whole bunch of meetings and meetups and things like that. And then in 2018, I traveled to Denver for what they called the Unite Summit, where they had all these independent candidates from around the country, including people who were running for Congress, for Senate, for governor, and then also some lower level ones. And it was one of the most amazing experiences that I ever experienced, because we had people from all over the country who just wanted to solve problems and do the right thing, right? So that was a great experience. Unfortunately, most of those candidates lost in 2018, and but I had the hook. I really wanted to get involved in the political reform space, and so I continued my participation in that. And then I found out about FairVote Virginia, which was all about advocating for ranked choice voting in Virginia, and and I became the vice president of FairVote Virginia. And then I went down to Richmond with our president, and we lobbied for bills and laws. And to our surprise, the General Assembly, the Virginia General Assembly, enacted they passed a bill to allow for ranked choice voting in counties and cities in Virginia. And
What is ranked choice voting?
sure, sure. So what ranked choice voting is technically is that the voters will have a ballot with all the candidates' names on it, and they'll rank the candidates. This is my first choice. This is my second choice. This is my third choice. And then if no one of those candidates receives over 50%, then the one who received the third place candidate, their votes will be reallocated based on the preferences of the voters. And so you can go on for several rounds until you have someone who has 50% of the votes. So this method of voting ensures majority support, right? So you don't have, there are some places, especially mayor's races around the country, where they had 20 or 30 candidates, and the ultimate winner, if not using this system, would win with 13% of the vote. So only 13% of the
Mm,
voters selected this person, and over, almost 90% selected other people, right? So
right.
this really does ensure majority support. Then it has other real benefits, because it encourages people to run, because they're no longer considered a spoiler. So it's called the spoiler effect. Let me get a little water here.
Mhm. Hmm.
So those are, you may have seen it, this year or other cycles, where where a third party candidate or an independent candidate gets labeled as a spoiler, right? So they would be like, "You're stealing votes away from me."
Right.
So we had that situation. If you want to bring it to the presidential level, we had that situation in 2000 with Ralph Nader, and then even in 2016, where you had Jill Stein and you had some libertarian candidates, where theoretically, people voting for those third party candidates could have drawn votes away from either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. And so if you have ranked choice voting, you can never be accused of being a spoiler because your votes are being retabulated if you're not the one that's selected. So, it also encourages more civil campaigning, right? Because not only do you want voters to vote for you first, you would also like their second place vote.
Right.
So it's so much harder to
Mm.
demonize your
Opponent.
opponent because you want their supporters to say, well, he's not my first choice, but
But he's
yeah,
my
he's my
second or my third.
second
Yeah.
choice. Yeah, right.
Mm.
And absolutely has been happening around the country where they do have ranked choice voting. And so, by the way, they have ranked choice voting in Maine and Alaska. And they also have it in about 20 cities and counties throughout America right now. And every time this goes up, there's a majority of people, sometimes a super majority, who support ranked choice voting. So, and the exit polling is also undisputable that people like, yeah, I like being able to rank people one, two, three, rather than
Yeah,
only
I would too,
one
actually.
choice, right? So,
Mhm.
so that's what's going on right now. And guess who are the organizations who oppose ranked choice voting? It's
The parties.
the
Maybe.
parties, right? It's
Yeah.
the established political parties. And
Mm.
what I hope we get into a little bit also is the political industrial complex, right? So the people who literally profit off of our dysfunction, off of our yelling and screaming at each other. Because if you're talking about the media, it's all about clicks and likes on social media, or who watches what cable news channel. And guess what doesn't sell? People talking about policies, people being boring, people solving problems. That doesn't sell, right?
Right.
And there are quotes from sitting members of Congress and senators who say there is no incentive for us to actually solve any problems, because if we solve those problems, then it will hurt us in fundraising. So the best way to increase your fundraising dollars is to have a problem that is unresolved. So you can talk about the border, you can talk about guns. All those issues currently are unresolved. And guess who makes a whole bunch of money off of it? Are the political candidates and the political industrial complex.
Gosh, I never thought about that.
Sorry to get you a little depressed over there, but
No, but I never thought about the fact that it's actually incentivized not to solve a problem.
exactly.
That's fascinating, but you're right. And you would think though, and people don't really dig into what problems politicians have solved. They look into what
The
how
rhetoric, what
charismatic,
they
yeah,
say,
how charismatic they
they're not
are.
solving the problem. They're just saying they're, for a wall, or for, for, against abortion or for abortion, but they're not solving a problem.
And that's the thing is that coming together and working through a problem as a team, as I know just in my small work center at work, it's a and if you do it properly with lots of collaboration and input from other people, it's messy and it's long and it's boring and a lot of people just don't want to they just or they don't understand and they don't understand that that's what it takes and we're not teaching people that that's what it takes.
But how do you
Um,
feel? How do you and your team feel after you solve a problem?
Super satisfied.
Super satisfied, right?
Super accomplished, and we can and go into the weekend and know that we did our job and we worked through all the bugs and it got fixed and we moved on and now we can fight another day. But
But how do Americans feel with our political system that nothing gets solved? They're super frustrated.
very frustrated. And
And
they just get they don't want to vote. They don't want to be a part of it.
apathy, yeah.
Mhm. It's absolutely
Or they
correct.
get radicalized, either on the right or the left, right? But they're not. I mean, the approval ratings of politicians is about 15% of Congress has a approval rating, but over 95% of the people who go up for reelection get reelected, right? And why is that? Because our system is broken.
How how do we educate people that there could be a different way? Like, what do I know we have conversations like I'm having right now with you, but I mean, we're so entrenched into this two-party system, and it's so it's like in people's DNA. Like people identify with the values of a Democrat or what they think the values of a Democrat are, or they identify with the values of a conservative or a Republican. How do you bridge that gap and say, no, there can be a different way, and there can be somebody who's an independent?
Well, first of all, it's about the system, right? And the system is severely broken right now. It's not working to solve problems. That's the biggest thing. And part of my mission is to educate people about, don't give up, and don't radicalize. Understand how the system works, and then work really, really hard, like myself and others do, to change the system. And this is completely legal, completely within our democratic process to go lobby people in Richmond, to go write letters and go, speak to my Arlington County Board meetings and everything
Mhm.
like that. This is what democracy is all about. Democracy is not about sitting in your basement at 2 o'clock in the morning, you know, vengeful tweeting or something like that. That is, you're not solving any problems. Maybe it's getting together with your neighbors and talking about these issues and talking about how democracy really works. All those are positive things you can do. One thing that, as you mentioned before, is the death of democracy is apathy. People who just put their head in the sand and, put their hands over their ears and just want it to all go away. And that's really not going to solve the problem, because there's a whole group of people who are profiting off of your apathy, your anger. And so you need to be that light that is saying, come here. And I'm telling you, as the Virginia lead for Veterans for Political Innovation, oh my God, the veteran volunteers that we have on our team are amazing, because I have other volunteers who are not veterans, but I can count on the veterans to get the job done, right? So we may be on a Zoom call and there may be 8 of us on the call, and I get people raising their hand, volunteering, like, oh yeah, I'll go write that letter, I'll go write that op-ed, I'll go talk to my county council person or something like that. And I call them up, or they email at me a week later and they're like, it's done, right? And here's the written notes from the meeting or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So it really is great. And by the way, like you were mentioning before, I got people on the left and the right that are veterans, but they're all rolling up their sleeves to fix our broken political system.
What does it take, do you think, for a candidate to say, I'm not going to align with the Democrats or I'm not going to align with the Republicans? I think that's what people think they have to do to win. And so the people that are running on an independent platform probably don't, I mean, they're taking a huge risk. I mean, because it's already so much money to fund. I mean, that's one of the things that, like, really intimidates me about running for office is fundraising, and just how in the world do you raise that kind of money to run for office, and I think that's kind of unfortunate that that's what it takes. But how do you convince people, especially like you said, veterans who are ready to step up and raise their right hand for another cause? How do we convince them to be the ones who now serve in another capacity?
So about 6 months ago, I did a lot of really deep thinking, reading, and I said, you know what? My theory of change is um, independent candidates running, winning, and serving at the local and state level. I am not getting involved in RFK Jr. running for office. I'm not getting involved in some of the other presidential candidates, because to be frank, they're not going to win, and they're just going to cause more hate and discontent. But you know who can win is your neighbor down the street who's on the PTA, or the person who is a real advocate for pedestrian safety in your community. And by the way, they've been on a few commissions and they've been participating in civic activities. Maybe they're active at their VFW or in something.
Rotary Club or whatever. Yeah.
And they come to a person like me and say, "Hey, Mike, I know you ran for office in 2021. I'm thinking about doing it. Tell me what I need to do." And I will give them the toolkit of what do you need to do. And it's hard, and you have to be willing to ask people for money. You have
Yeah,
to be
that's
willing
the scariest part,
to
in my
ask
opinion.
people to dedicate hours and hours of their free time as a volunteer. And you got to put your hat into the ring. But I will tell you, because of the way that I've done this when I ran for office in 2021, I first of all, let me digress a little bit. What the political parties do is they have these lists. So if you're at the local level or even at the federal level and you're running for office, and they have a list of who voted in the Democratic primary or who voted in the Republican primary, and they will only knock on the doors of
Yep.
people of their own party.
Yep.
It's ridiculous. You are representing every single person in your district. You should not be doing that. And you know what I do when I knocked on doors? Door to door to door to door to door. And I didn't care if they had a Democratic sign out in front or anything like that. I had conversations with everyone in Arlington while I was running from office. I didn't get everybody because there's 240,000 people, but
It's very
I spoke with everyone. Yeah, I didn't. And Arlington is a very, very Democratic place, and I was running as a center right independent. But I'll tell you something else is I never had a door slammed in my face. I never had a unkind word towards me. I had people said they weren't going to vote for me, but I never had that because it's so much harder to do face to face than it is on your on X or
Oh, yeah, yeah.
on Facebook or something like that. It is so much harder to be nasty to your neighbor than it is on social media. So, yeah, so there's tips. And then so I decided to, launch Independence for America. I've created 3 podcasts. I need to create some more and everything like that. But those of you that have seen these 3 podcasts, you'll be looking at these people like, these are all awesome human beings who are serving their community. And
Mhm.
you have a woman like Laura Sibilia, who is a representative in the Vermont State House, and
Mhm.
she's not only ran and won, she keeps getting reelected, and she keeps getting calls from the governor saying, "Hey, I need you to be the bridge between the Republicans and the Democrats because you're the independent," right? Um, the people who ran for Congress um, in Alaska, they're also those bridges now because they had nonpartisan primaries and ranked choice voting. So all these
Mhm.
systems things are actually having a positive effect right now. Kirsten Sinema in Arizona, she was a Democrat and she decided to become an independent because she knows some people don't like her, some people like her, but she knows where the public is, right? And she knows that the Democratic Party is probably going too far left in places like Arizona. So she's like, I'm going to be an independent because that's where the people are. And
Mhm.
so she's going to run next year as an independent, and we'll see if she wins or loses. But running as an independent is really, really hard, and very few win, but it's definitely worth the try.
But it's possible, is what you're
But it's
saying. At the
possible.
local level, it's possible to run as an independent. And just so that I better understand and the independent movement, do you think it would be possible at some point if enough people said we're independent that we wouldn't even need political parties anymore?
So a lot of people think that the Republican Party is collapsing right now,
Mhm.
and some people think the Democratic Party is going too far to the left. So I don't. I think we will still have political parties, but we would be much better off if we had a multi-party system and we had more than 2. The CEO of Veterans for All Voters, Todd Connor, he mentioned that, and you're in Europe right now, but if you if we're the State Department and we're trying to stand up a new political system in other places in the world, like Iraq or Afghanistan or maybe parts of Africa, the worst thing we would do would be to create a one party system, and the second worst thing we'd do is create a two party system, because that's basically the two factions of a country and they would all be yelling and screaming at each other. But what do we have in America? We have a two party system. So even though our own State Department, who does this for a living, um, they design political systems that are multi-party and have things like ranked choice voting and have other ways to ensure that the minority voices are represented in the government. But here in America, we just have two extreme parties right now.
Mike, I never thought about the fact that the system is set up to fail. Like I never thought about that. Like I always just thought it was, a return. We need to return to civics. We need to learn healthy discourse. We need to be respectful of one another. But I never thought about the idea that, number one, if we fix problems, then they don't have something to draw eyeballs or draw the
Fundraising,
yeah, fundraising. They don't have a way to make money if they're not controversial, because controversy
I'll give you another
grabs
example.
attention.
Is two of the most there's a lot of them, but the most vocal members of the House right now are Marjorie Taylor Greene
Yes.
and Acacia or
Oh,
AOC.
yes,
I'm
yes,
gonna get 'em wrong.
the Latino lady who is,
And
yes, very
as
young. I
people
forget.
were, as we were approaching another government shutdown, which we were approaching it again, right? Some regular citizens are like, let's take away their salary, and that will make them want to all get together and solve this problem. I laugh, because they make millions of dollars on cable news and through the clicks and the other social media. The $174,000 salary that they get is a drop in the bucket to their entire income stream, right? So
But
they are
because they
getting
own a lot of other
paid.
businesses and other things, I just want to make sure I catch
They
that
just
point.
they get paid a fee for all these things, right? So for
Mhm.
being a guest on certain cable news stations, for having a podcast that generates revenue, right? If you have a
Mm.
million, 4 million viewers, you're going to be, I have, I've earned a grand total of $270 so far in my Substack, right? I'm assuming that those two people have a lot more viewers and they're probably making a lot more money. Maybe they write a book or something like that. But
Correct.
one thing many of those people in Congress are not doing is solving problems, right? So they don't care that much about their $174,000 salary. It's not the largest portion of their annual income.
Yeah, it's interesting, Mike, because I was just watching an episode with on the Daily Wire with Ben Shapiro, and he was talking about how so many politicians, it might have been Matt, the other one that's on there, but basically they see that like politicians just really just want to be commentators. Like that's what they really, they're not there to solve problems and get stuff done. They're there because they want to be a personality, and they're trying to build their name, their face, but they're not necessarily there to do what it is you're talking about, which is rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, figuring out how to compromise.
Compromise, right? Yeah.
Hmm.
And yeah, and you may have heard this too, is that some commentator may say, "Oh, he's just auditioning for his next job on Fox News," or she's just
Mm,
auditioning for her next job on MSNBC, right? So, and you're in that biz, so you see it closer than I do.
I do, I do, and it's unfortunate because as you said, solving problems as a team is incredibly satisfying. It's incredibly hard, but when you do it, it and it really leads to something that makes life better for people. I mean, here's just a very lame example, but we had an issue with a lot of our key leader events where everybody wanted us to do an article about it, like an article about two people shaking hands. Like that's ridiculous, and no one cares. And then I realized, like, oh my gosh, we have this dormant LinkedIn page on Marcom that no one is really using. And I'm like, whoo, I know LinkedIn. Let's start using LinkedIn for all the staff visits. And people love it. I mean, I can tag the staff on there, and it's just and that's the right, mechanism for those kind of events. And it got my staff out of having to write press releases about every single
Yeah.
time someone came and saw the admiral, because it's not a story that they just sat down and had a conversation.
But it's
But
a good
people,
LinkedIn post. Yeah. I
it
can
is.
definitely see that. Yeah.
Yep.
And the other sadness about this dysfunctional political system is there are good members of Congress, there are good senators out there, and guess what? They're frustrated too, and they're leaving. So they're the good ones, unfortunately, are leaving, and you may even say that about the military. Sometimes you look at some people who decide to leave. Sometimes they're the better people, and so we have a little bit of a problem if our good people are leaving and our bad ones are staying.
Right, and they're the ones that are getting the promotions, and they're the ones sticking ahead, but they're also the ones that aren't solving any of the problems, or aren't fixing, the issues that need fixed. What would you advise somebody, who is on active duty and wants to be involved in politics?
That's a great question. So another training I went to was through this organization called New Politics, and I want to draw your readers' attention to that organization too. So New Politics, they provide candidate training, but only to people who have served. Right, so they could be served in the military, they could have been in the Peace Corps, they could be in Teach for America, and it was a really intensive. We had online training for 2 hours once a week for a month, and then we went live for 3 days in March. Great, really, really great training, and a lot of those people were former military. So if people are like, "Hey, I'm getting ready to leave the military, but I want to continue to serve," then I would absolutely, I would like you to think about running for office. Please don't run for president or a senator or even federal office. Run for your county board. Run for your, school board, or sheriff. We definitely need some more military as sheriffs. So those of you that are um, maybe you're a military police background or something like that. Um, we've had problems here in Arlington, but there's no competition on who's running to be sheriff. So in Virginia, sheriffs are elected office. Every state's different on who's elected and who's not. So I would really encourage people to think about it. But you got to start your campaign early, right? And this is where it is a problem with people. And you and I have talked about like the DoD instruction and the Hatch Act and things like that. So absolutely talk to your ethics officer. But I ran for Arlington County Board as an independent while I was still a federal government employee in the intelligence community. So you read the instruction, you talk to your ethics officer, and see if it's legal or not. And but I really, really encourage active duty members to consider. You can even you'd have to talk to it about with your ethics officer, but it is even possible for a really, really low level um, um, local office to perhaps even run for office while you're still on active duty. And
Yeah, I would love to know, like, how you would do that. And can you explain for the audience, and maybe just for myself, because it was my county board of supervisors who was up for election this cycle. In fact, I think our election day was yesterday, but I did a
where
mail-in
are you
ballot.
registered to vote?
I am a registered to vote in Norfolk, Virginia.
Norfolk. Okay, so
Yeah.
I actually know some of the politicians down there. So
Oh, how interesting. Yeah. I don't remember the name of the gentleman that I voted for, but I get all his Facebook posts now. He's a lawyer. And yeah, I hope I've actually written him a couple times and been in touch with him. But I'm curious for the county board of super. I'm a little familiar with city council, what they do. But tell me a little bit about the board of supervisors. That part I think I've done some pet advocacy there before, where I just talked about puppy mills. But can you tell me a little bit about some of these local offices? Because I don't think people even understand what people do at those levels.
Oh, I know. Yeah, and I've totally geeked out on this, so I'll try to educate some people about it. So in Virginia, we have 133 counties and cities. And so then you also have towns, which are smaller than cities. And they do so much of our daily lives, right? So they run our schools, they run our fire departments, they run our police, roads, garbage collection, all that kind of stuff. So if you really want to have an impact on your life and your neighbors' lives, get involved with your local government. And so there's also so you're just wondering what they do, or
Yeah,
I'm
like the
sorry,
difference between like a city council and a county board of supervisors.
so they run all those things, and they do that usually through full-time staff, but they're very accessible. In fact, just this week I've met with every member. In the last 2 weeks, I've met with every member of the Arlington County Board individually. So that's how accessible there are, and there's 240,000 people in Arlington. So I'm not a special person, but because it's local government, they usually have their door open where people can
Mhm.
petition and ask for things. And, we're talking about roads, we're talking about planning and schools and things like that. But it's the perfect place for a retiring military officer to get their foot wet and get involved in their local community. I call it, being twice the citizen, right? So you could have served for 20 years and like, hey, it's time for me to get out, but I want to keep serving. And you could say, hey, I want to run for local office, and you do a great campaign, and then you win, and then you serve.
Do you have to, as a military member, go back to your hometown? It's like I'm from Columbus, Ohio, and but I haven't lived there since I was 19, and I have friends still there, but there seems to be like anytime I see a politician, they always love to tell you that they're from that city and they're tied to that city. And I think maybe some veterans might be concerned if they don't want to go back to their hometown, what it would how hard it might be to try to serve in a city that they weren't born and raised in.
I don't think you need to go back to your hometown, but to be honest with you, you have to have some roots at least for a few years.
2 years, that's
It's
fair.
funny. It's funny here in Arlington. I mean, here we are. We're a stone's throw to the nation's capital. We got the Arlington National Cemetery. We got the Pentagon. We got tens of thousands of military people. But unless you have like done something in Arlington, like a civic association president or PTA or something like that, people won't even give you the time of day, right?
Which
So
makes sense.
you don't need to have 20 years there, but if you think you're going to parachute in and then run for local office because you just took off the uniform, it's usually not going to work.
This reminds me, I can't remember the name of the play, and it'll probably come to me as we're talking, but there's a city in Germany called Ammergau. It's
Abraham,
where
yeah.
yes, it's where the NATO school is. And
Oh,
is it called The Passion of the
I,
Christ? I can't
oh
remember
yeah. I actually, when I was in the reserves, I actually did a week there.
Okay, okay. So,
Yeah,
I
Abraham.
had no idea about this play, like, no idea, except that that entire town is just covered with crosses and nativity scenes and all these things, and I'm like, "Well, what's going on?" And apparently there's this play that they put on every few years, like, not
Like
even I
10
think every
years
year.
or 5 years, something like it's a long
Yes!
time, yeah.
Yes, and in order to be in the play, you have to have lived in the town, like, certain number, like 15 years or something crazy, in order to just be an actor or to participate or be a part of the play. But this play is, like, incredibly famous, like, people all over the world come to Obergamagau, I'm probably mispronouncing this lovely German town, just to see this play, and it sort of reminds me of what you're saying. It's like you have to be invested in that particular area, in order to, uh, feel connected and to be connected. You wanna be able to show that you are, invested in the area, but I think that's a good thing. I mean, it's a way to deepen your ties to your fellow neighbor, and it's a way to build community, and, I'll tell you, that's one thing I'm really looking forward to about retirement. I love the UK, I love my life, I love NATO, but, I really do look forward to doing exactly what you're doing, Mike, and deepening into a community and figuring out where myself and Mr. Harry are gonna, and Jada, of course, she's over there, where we're gonna settle down because I do like community and being a part of my neighborhood. Even in Norfolk right now, I'm still very invested in the area. We own a home there, and uh, just think it's incredibly important to know your neighbors and to know and to be concerned about what happens in your area.
Yeah, and military people, twice this, serving twice, right? So you serve for 20 years, then you serve your community, and I think we have unique skill where we really, really know how to bring people together, and we also know how to solve problems, and and we know how to work hard. So there's about 10 reasons why military people make great local government officials moving forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Is there anything else that you want to address in this podcast that I haven't asked you about, or anything else that you comes to mind that you would like people to know about this issue?
Oh, there's so many. So I'm gonna turn people on to a book here for a second.
And I'll
So
put you on full screen so we can kind of see you a little bit better.
all right. So I encourage everybody to get this book off of Amazon. It's about a less than 200 page read, but it talks about
The
the
politics industry, for those of you who are listening.
politics industry with Catherine Gale. So that was part of my other formation where um, she. You can also look at her videos if you don't have that much time and you want to watch a 5-minute video with Catherine Gale. And she runs this organization called um, the Institute for Political Innovation, I think it's called. But she she looks at this. So the so Catherine Gale is, and you don't need to go on full screen, but
Okay.
Catherine Gale is the author, but then Michael Porter is the co-author. And those of you that have been to business school or something like that, he is the guru for business strategy, right? He is the guy, right? And so they teamed up together and they looked at our political system like you would look at a industry, right? So, the chemical industry, the medical industry, and
Hmm.
what they discovered is that our problem is that we have a duopoly, two political parties, and there's no regulation and there's no competition or very little competition.
Hmm.
And that is the biggest problem. And then these duopolies, they actually like having a foil, the Republicans or the Democrats, because then they get fundraising, right? And they will work in collusion to prevent third parties or independents from running for office or being successful. Then you have the political industrial complex. So you have all these political consultants, and guess what? They only work for the red team or the blue team. And so if you're an independent or you're a third party person, you're saying, hey, I need a media person to, do my website or something. They're like, sorry, we only work with Republicans or Democrats. So, and then you may, in this age, this digital age, there's all kinds of data, and you're like, hey, can I get that, pile of data that will tell me about the voters in my district? They're like, sorry, that's, this is our data, it's proprietary, and we only give it to Republicans, or it's our data and we only give it to Democrats. So these are some of the big barriers. But as these business people, they love competition. They know that America was built on our market economy, where we have, very, very competitive, business systems, right? And think about Uber. Do you use Uber?
I do.
So what if people said, no, we have these taxis, we're not
Mhm.
even going to let you even start this industry because we're protecting the taxi industry. By the way, that did happen in certain places.
Yeah.
That might have happened in
Oh, yeah,
London.
and it
Uh,
happens in Airbnb too, with the Airbnb
right?
movement versus the
Yeah,
hotels.
you're dealing with that right now too. And so,
Mhm.
but in politics, it's even worse because they are both these parties, the duopolies, are keeping independents out of the political process, or raising the barriers so high. Even the number of signatures you need for getting on the ballot in some places is extraordinarily high for independents or third parties. where the Democrats or Republicans, they don't even have to produce any signatures. This is what is going on in a lot of places.
It's sad, and it can change if enough people understood what you're talking about. And I think that's the issue, is that what you're advocating for is not in the mainstream at all. I
And I
mean,
and I think it's really, really important because again, I can ride my bike to the U.S. Capitol. I absolutely implore people to work within the system, right? Without violence or threats of violence. And by the way, the violence and the threats of violence, it happens both on the left and the right. People can Google this, but there is a viral video of a Democrat accosting a Republican poll worker right here in Arlington, and poor guy's got over 5 million views right now. So,
oh, I'm gonna have to look it up
and
now that
I
you
think
said it.
he dropped about 20 f bombs within about a minute, and was almost physically threatening this. And the Republican poll worker literally was just trying to hand out a sample ballot, right? So, a red sample ballot versus the blue sample ballot. And I'm sure if we go to Republican areas, that they could be acting that way with Democrats sometimes, right? So we want to have everybody dealing with kindness and civility, and my theory of change is to start local and scale. So
I think you're right. I mean, I agree with you. I think that trying to get at the federal system or even the state system is almost like a bridge too far if we don't even know who our neighbors are and we're not engaged at the community level to try to make an impact. Um, so
yeah, and
I
my theory of change is to get people to run as an independent for your board of supervisor or your school board. They do that for 4 years. They do a great job. Then maybe they run for state senate or something like that. Not,
sure.
and then maybe they do that for 4 years or 8 years, and then they run for U.S. House of Representative or something like that. I do believe that experience in politics matters, and it's not all. I'm not one of these people who thinks that you shouldn't be a lifelong politician. I think people learn how to, if the incentives are right. This is what I'm trying to fix. If the incentives are right, you'll be like, maybe I should try to solve problems that will help my constituents. That's really
Right.
what we need to get back to, right?
Hmm.
Oh, my constituents, we really need a bridge to the island, and that's going to cost a whole bunch of money. Maybe I'll get together with my Republicans and my Democrats, and we'll find some common ground, and maybe they need a bridge in their district, and we'll do a little horse trading or something like that. There is nothing wrong with that. That's actually okay. Now it's these other incentives that are causing our system to be dysfunctional.
Yeah, I agree with you. And wow. I mean, I've just got a lot out of this conversation, and it really is leaving me with a lot to think about because, like I said, I think I didn't. This is something that we needed the hour to discuss because it's not as simple as just having people stop fighting and being kind. It's a structural problem that goes
Exactly.
much deeper. Um, you can have all the kindness in the world, but like you said, we're a species like any species that's run off of incentives and and I mean that's marketing 101. And if we don't have the right incentives that will push us to make positive change, that's a problem. And found it very fascinating what you said, and I'm just going to touch upon it one more time about the State Department and how when they go into nations and they go to build nations, they encourage more than two parties or more than one party. And then why are we so dependent on just these two parties to exist, which are polarizing and do need, like you said, that foil and that enemy to work against in order to generate the likes and the clicks and the views and the next job and all those other things. So,
Well,
gosh,
going back to our founding as a country, George Washington, John Adams warned against political parties. And
hmm,
if people know their Constitution, there's not one word about political parties in the Constitution. So They didn't even think, they knew in England they had political parties, and they said we don't really want political parties. And now it wasn't it was very soon after that in the election of 1800 where they already had political parties, right? So you had the Federalists and you had the Democrats, and but that's another point to be made, is that the Republican Party was formed in 1856 and the Democratic Party was 1800, and we still have these two things, right? So, you
Hmm.
know, what other part of our lives is basically the same as it was 150 years ago or 200 years ago? So this is another opportunity where we all need to roll up our sleeves and maybe try to do something a little different.
I agree. Well, I love it. I think the only last question I might have is about, I know there's a level of fundraising that you need to have, but is the price of admission too high? I mean, at the local level, people like myself that are very financially, like to save money, like to never, like that's the scariest part I think about running for office is how much money would you, I mean, I understand that you have to go door to door and you have to fundraise and all those things, but can someone raise enough money for it to be, even if they lose, okay, they took a $15,000 risk, okay, but
Mm.
at some point, when does it become too much? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. It it's very difficult to run and win if you're really, really hurting for money.
Mhm.
You need to have both some of your own financial resources and then also some time. And so if uh, sadly, we got a guy down the street. He ran for office, did pretty well. He's an Air Force Academy graduate, and he ran for Senate here. I mean, he didn't do that well. He very long shot to win. He ran as a Republican in a very Democratic area, but he was a international airline pilot, right? You're not going to be able
Mhm.
to devote enough time to like go to debates and to knock on doors. So you don't need to have a huge amount of money, but you have to have enough personal wealth or income and enough time to do it successfully. And if you don't kind of have those two things, it's going to be really, really hard. You need time and money,
Yeah.
and then
Mhm.
you need to be not shy about
Yeah.
asking other people for money.
And you gotta put yourself out there, which is
Yeah.
a good thing, though, because those kinds of things make us better.
But that's really hard for people too, because the other thing is you have to be out there on social media, and a lot of people are not comfortable with that either. So those are three ingredients that you need to have a certain amount of wealth or income, you need to have a certain amount of time, and you need to be out there on social media.
What's the minimum price of admission? I'm just curious, like, what have you seen,
So at
financially?
a really small local level in a small town or something, we're talking a few $1,000s.
Mhm.
And usually you start off your campaign with loaning yourself your campaign money, and then hopefully
Just
get
fundraising,
up
you pay
to
yourself back.
basically you
Yeah.
pay yourself back, right? But sadly, one of my independent candidates that I'm advising right now, she was in a race. She's in Senate District 29 in Virginia. Her name's Monica Gary. She was on my podcast, and that race, both the Republican, I think, raised like 1.7 million, and the Democrat, I think, was 1.5 million. And somehow she's an amazing woman. She raised over $200,000. So as an independent. So
Wow.
these things, and again, all the money in the Virginia has very lax campaign finance. And this is an off-year election, so tons of money flowed into Virginia this cycle, and it really drowned out just regular people who want to run for office. And guess who makes all the money? It's the political consultants, it's the media people, and everything. So yeah, not great.
It just makes me sad, like, that we can't use all the free tools in the world, that we can't use podcasts like mine and get and pitch media outlets it just it makes
Well,
me
people
sick.
are doing that. People are being creative, and
Mhm.
and they would absolutely, be on a show like yours or be on a
Sure.
political show or something like that to get their word out there. But there's still just this, you got to have a certain amount of money or you're just not going to be competitive.
Right, right. Yeah, I agree. Well, this has been, like I said, such a great conversation. If people want to get in touch with you, what is the best way they can reach out if they have any more questions?
Yeah, I encourage people to hit up my Substack, which is www.independenceforamerica.com. There you go. And if you're going to Google it, just do Independence for America and then put Substack, and it comes right up in Google. So, but just add that Substack part. Yeah, one more thing is I'm heading out early tomorrow morning, going to um, the Independent National Leaders Summit in Denver again, and so I'll be rubbing shoulders with my independent minded people throughout the country.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mike. I really appreciated this opportunity. I learned a lot. I hope you guys all out there learned a lot. And I will just say goodbye very quickly backstage to you, and I'll go on full screen. But thank you so much for taking the time to educate all of us about such an important issue and taking the time to really explain it. I think a lot of us just think we know about these issues, but we really don't. And it takes a little bit of time to kind of dig into it and see what this is really all about.
Hey, it was great talking to you, Teresa, and look forward to hearing from some of your viewers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for taking the time to join us tonight. I will have another show next week. I'm having a animal advocate. Always love it when I have the animal people on. But this gentleman wrote a book called Be More Mosquito, and it is all about speaking up and standing up for change. He's a former veterinarian, now turned animal advocate full time, and works in Parliament. He's here in the UK and does an animal committee action app dog animal all party parliamentary animal welfare group. And I've been to a few of their meetups at Parliament, and it's an amazing organization. And he's really teaching me a lot more about advocacy and all those things. So thank you all for joining me tonight. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day or your evening. Please be sure to subscribe if you're joining us from YouTube or wherever you find social media. You can watch all the previous episodes either on YouTube or where you find podcasts. Thanks all. Have a great night.